It's very nicely organized. Everything is so nicely organized. So because we've already met each other and we said hi, I will not do it again, but let's do it again. So thank you, Gabriela.
Okay,
Very
it
nice
is
of
a
you to do this.
pleasure.
And really nice of you to do this. The background is, I tell you, background was that there is this show that I call, that's called In Conversation with the Beautiful Mind. So Migle, who's a fellow for this year, was on that. So she spoke
Mhm.
about this fellowship. So after that, I did not even know about it. So there was a post on LinkedIn on this. I saw that. And then I was looking at the list of people and I said, oh, this is so many people I'm connected with. So let's just have a conversation with them and let us also help prospective applicants, maybe for this year or for next year. So let's
Mhm.
talk to them. So that process started. And then it became, I realized that the people on that list, all these fellows, they're such nice people. Let's do it on a regular basis. So now it's going, attempt is to do this with all fellows. I started this new series because of that, this Mediator Experiences. So the idea is that memorable experiences don't have to be in a mediation, in relation to the mediation world. So this is
Mhm.
how it happened. So that's the background. So thank you very much. And
It is my pleasure.
please, if you want to introduce yourself and then tell us about your experience with the fellowship, and please.
Okay. So my name is Gabriela Assmar. I I'm Brazilian, but I'm also Lebanese. Brazil has a lot of Lebanese influence. So ever since I was a child, I was interested in resolving conflicts. And my family was a great resource to learn that, full of raw material, like most families that I know. And then I grew up not willing to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an engineer at first, but then I missed the human side of life. And then I decided to study law as well. And I did. And at the beginning, I was very involved with uh, tax lawyering, because I had to do with numbers and I was more acquainted and so on. And again, I missed the human side of it. And I went to the United States to look for international experience in general. And that's how I became aware that something called mediation existed. The first sentence I read about mediation, I was studying civil procedure at that moment for my master's. And there was one sentence in huge amount of materials that I had to read. And it only said that mediation is a methodology that helps parties find solutions that everybody can accept. And when I read that sentence, it was a life-changing moment, an aha moment. I said, well, there is a name to what I really want to do with my life. And what I have been doing on a more experimental basis, but there's already a methodology for that. So I dove into mediation, did everything I could during my master's. And after the master's, I stayed to work in New York in a New York law firm. And that's how I had my first contact with JAMS. I asked the litigation partner to take me with the legal team accompanying clients into mediations, and they took me to JAMS. And I shadowed my first mediation in 1999 at JAMS, and I said, this is what I want to do when I grow up. Of course, I was already a grown up. I was already a lawyer for a number of years, but that was something that where I could see the world in through better lenses. That's how I really saw solutions to the real problems that we face in life and that many times are very hard to overcome. And so it was my first experience really seeing a better world for the future and how I could be a small part of that movement that the world really needs,
Very nice.
and humankind in general.
Yeah.
Uh, So I came back to Brazil in 2000, and I started talking about mediation to people that had never heard of it. And many people mix the concepts of mediation and meditation, which is not too bad. But I had a full field, completely empty, and I did everything I could, from community mediation to mediation in prisons to mediation in secondary schools, primary schools, and business mediation, because business was my natural environment. That's how I made money. I was always at that time, at that point, I was already an experienced lawyer working either in law firms or in big corporations. So that was my natural. And then at some point, I became the local director for a global NGO network, and I created everything from scratch in Brazil, being part of this Partners Global Network. Partners is the name of the network. And our main project was to do mediation in schools, but in very conflicted area, in armed conflicted areas, in the slums in Rio, where there's a lot of violence. And at that moment, while I was doing this work, which was certainly one of the most beautiful I've ever done, the fellowship started. And I already had, not just, I had this previous connection with JAMS through the law firm that I had worked for in New York, but the founder of this NGO network was a very good friend of many of the senior partners senior owners at JAMS. So I learned about the fellowship, and I applied immediately. And I was a fellow in 2011. So I was one of the first teams of fellows. And it is also an experience that is worth living. We don't only have access to beautiful minds, to great mediators, technically speaking, but we can live the environment inside of JAMS. And they are very generous in terms of what they share with us, with the goal that we can go back to our country and do something good with it, and develop mediation even further than we had been working for. So I'm super thankful. And when I came back to Brazil right after that experience, I became one of the co-authors of the Brazilian mediation law. And thanks to that experience, I think I did something good. And ever since, I use mediation in everything I do. So nowadays, I'm an ombudsman in a very, very complicated pension fund. And doing ombudsing, doing what I have to do in terms of conflicts with clients, internal conflicts, conflicts with the law many times, because I also take care of the whistleblower channel. But in everything I do, I use mediation. Even when I cannot call myself a mediator because I'm on using a different hat. But mediation becomes part of our lives. It's unavoidable. It's something that it just catches us in the roots, so we can be a better person. And it's not like we're perfect, of course. We have our own conflicts where we are as violent many times as anybody else. But at least we notice what we could have done better much faster than if we were not mediators, if we were not transformed by this experience. And then we can fix the situation faster as well, with all our faults, with all our imperfect beings, but we're a little bit more and more close to awareness, which helps in everything. And then just to finalize the path. Recently, a few years ago, doing a mediation, I felt that sensation that most mediators have faced at some point, that we couldn't help at the last step of a huge mediation where parties came from very far away. Nobody believed in an agreement, and then they crossed all the boundaries, all the challenges, and at the last moment for an agreement, they backed up. And I was devastated, and I thought, what didn't I see? What I couldn't help them see? What was missing after such a long way that we had successfully overcome? And I understood that in many situations, human beings are they're caught up by something that is bigger than they are. They are contained in a system where they belong, and where it's just life as it is for them, because they were born in that system. They were everything that they see in the world, they see through those lenses, so they cannot criticize their own lenses. And that's how I got to the methodology that I use a lot now. I started using it as a tool for mediation, and then it became something autonomous in my practice. And this has to do with the methodology created by a German guy that recently passed away. His name is Bert Hellinger. And the name we use for it is constellation. Because when it was translated from German into English and then into Portuguese and other languages, it was translated as constellation, because the constellations of stars, they also have a characteristic of every living group, which is the place of one star cannot be replaced by another. Each member of the group has its own place, and that's how it should be, because what characterizes one constellation in relation to another one is exactly where each star is positioned in relation to the other. And that's how every system works, every living system, from bacteria, from plants, to corporations, to nations. Every system that is living has this characteristic of everybody having a place that is singular. And through the understanding of this great man, he was actually a philosopher, psychologist, pedagogist. So he had many hats. He was a very holy, he had a whole view of humanity through many parameters. And he could understand this functioning of human beings, or every living being, in a different way. So he didn't discover it. He only organized what was already there through natural laws. But once we understand it, we can deal with it. So that's what the methodology does. So I said why it's called constellation. It has nothing to do with the zodiac. But the main name, the name in German meant co-location. So it's always about the relative positioning that characterizes the relationship. And of course, the relationship has a big influence in who you are, what you have to show in that situation. So it's a different situation if it's like that, or like that, or like that, or like that, or like that. So the way you are positioned in a relationship in relation to the other person has a lot of influence in your behavior, and of course in the behavior of the other person and in everything that happens around. So using this methodology in addition to mediation, we can really build solutions uh, that lead to a better life.
Wow, Gabriela, that was amazing. You've gone through so much. You've gone through, you've inspired people, and you've also told us how when that mediator mindset meets the right place, it's the right place at the right time situation, suddenly something sparks and you suddenly take to it, which I've been talking about this getting inspired. And I mean, I'll tell you about that as we go along, but this is something which you've done and the philosophical aspect of it and everything. Okay, this is the clip by itself has to be taken out separately and sent out. In that little clip, you've said so much. It's like amazing. That I think that's really nice. So I know this conversation is going to be very, very interesting as we go along.
I hope so.
But what about your experience as such in terms of the fellowship and the people you met and those relationships? What about that?
My work plan was to learn more and organize the elements, the necessary elements, the requirements to build a business mediation market. Because in Brazil, since 2010, we have had legislation, the first norm that we had to regulate mediation was from the National Council of Justice, which is a body constituted by not just the judiciary, but all the legal players. So lawyers, prosecutors, the public defendants, and so on. They are represented in that body. And that body regulates mainly the work environment in the courts. So they had this resolution since 2010 about how the judiciary could incorporate mediation. So we private practitioners, we were already working for some time then. And then at that point, it was the first spark of a mediation public policy. After that, we had not just the law where I worked with many others, but the Civil Procedure Code also incorporated mediation in 2016. And when the Civil Procedure Code incorporated mediation, the lawyers at least had to know about mediation. So it was a big movement towards mediation because people not only got curious, but they needed the knowledge. So there was a lot of, it started to have a big movement of mediation trainings and so on. But that is a good step towards a market, but it's not enough. To have a market, you need to have the fundamentals. You need to have people willing to pay for that service. Correct. And I know that throughout the world, and actually I did a very interesting constellation for the prosperity of mediators anywhere in the world. And what it showed clearly, because as I said, it's not something that we invent or we develop, it's something that comes up in the field, and then it's a whole different conversation. But so it makes the main characteristics of a group show up, basically. So every mediator in the world is very purposeful. Most people that I know that became a mediator became because they want to do something good with their lives. Most are, not most, but many are lawyers. They are a little sometimes depressed, sometimes just demotivated with the practice of law, because the practice of law is something that is that ends in itself. And I know very, very few cases where people got off of a legal process better than they were before, if any. Because we lose time, we lose the relationships, we lose our face. And many times what we get in the end, even if when we win the cause, is something that has nothing to do with our actual needs, with our actual desires at first. So it escalates the conflict more than resolves it in general, at least in Brazil. And in Brazil, we have a number of litigation that is incredible. I'll tell you a story about the number of litigations in a while. So most mediators are doing it first for themselves, first as a self-knowledge mechanism, because when you are mediating, you cannot miss anything. You have to be at the present. You have to be aware of everything that is going on in the room, and at the same time, you cannot impose your own lenses, your own wishes, your own way of doing things. You have to help the parties be themselves and build a solution that will work for them, maybe not for you. And maybe you disagree with what they're deciding, but it's their process that you're just facilitating. So you have to work on a way of being present that is without self-intention. It's without the possibility of you being the star in the room. And that is a sentence that I heard of a very senior mediator at JAMS that I love. He was a former judge, and he said that in order to get into these shoes of the mediator, before he opened the door of the room where the parties were waiting for him, he always stopped, breathed, and said to himself, I'm not the most important person in this room. And this humble attitude is absolutely fundamental to being a mediator. And it's something so little known for most of us. We're trained to be the most important. We're trained to make ourselves so important. And in reality, we're just another human being trying to be happy and avoid suffering. And through mediation, we train that human kindness without which we will not help the parties. The more we want to help them with what we know, the less we do help them. So it's a training for life. So many people do that for them first, and then for the parties. The parties are almost like, oh, you're there. And by being so fulfilled by this practice, many people forget that they need to make money. I'm not talking about everybody, but many people, most people. And since there are so many people happy of just being there as a mediator, the market, many people do it for free or for almost free. And then the message that it sends to the market is, it has no value. Because for the people who, the potential clients, the people who have not had an experience, a good experience in mediation, they don't know what it is, and nobody pays for what they don't know what it is. And because, of course, when the parties are inside the conflict, living the conflict in their cells, in their bones, neurologically, they're not able to see a possibility of a mutually positive solution. And when somebody from outside says, well, I can help you. I can help you be the best of yourselves in order to find the best possible solution. And that person that has tried so many times to resolve the problem looks at this person and says, but what do you know about the situation? And the person says, that I don't know, and that's how I can help. It's very hard to understand. It's not intellectually complete in our human level of understanding. So only once people have been through the experience, they can really value mediation and its effects and its long-term effects. So the decision to pay for that service is not obvious. Although I many times compare mediation to oncology, So we're doctors of a cancer in the relationship body. So when I have the parties looking at each other with hate, what is happening here affects their bodies. And that is the relationship space. So a conflict is very similar to the phenomenon of cancer in the body. It's something, a part of something that got out of the natural, the organic functioning and decided not to collaborate with the rest. That's exactly what cancer cells do. And they're only dangerous because they multiply very fast, faster than the healthy cells. Otherwise, they're weaker. So it's exactly like the conflict phenomenon. So although we are somehow comparable to doctors, when you're feeling the pain in your body, you don't think twice about paying for the best doctor if you can. But for conflict, when it's about conflict, you only blame the other party, which is much faster and cheaper than looking at your own responsibility and being again a co-author of something with that person, being a co-author of the solution. So paying for a mediator takes a much wider range of elements than it does for doctors or for lawyers or for anybody that will take care of just one of the parties. So, but then coming back to my fellowship, I wanted to discover what these elements were to build a healthy market. And the one conversation that I just want to mention was with a very, very successful lawyer. He was a big partner in a huge law firm, worldwide law firm. And I interviewed him, as many other people, asking, why did you take the pioneer steps into mediation? Why did you start taking your clients to mediation when the market was just starting and very few people knew about it? And his answer was absolutely brilliant. He said, I didn't go to mediation. I didn't suggest mediation to my clients because I loved mediation or because I loved human beings and wanted to be a peacemaker. I did it because I needed to offer my client a wiser solution than the other law firm was offering. Full stop. So many times when I teach lawyers, both about being a mediator and about being a lawyer in a mediation setting, I mentioned this conversation because I think it was very, very wise.
Yes. So, and now I don't know where it says on your LinkedIn profile, the philosopher word has to come somewhere on your profile. Gabriela, the philosopher.
I think I don't deserve the title.
You do.
But I love the ones who deserve.
No, I think it is wonderful. I'm telling you these. I thought that was one clip. Now this clip, all of them together, I think is going to make a very, 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 very interesting watch for people. So definitely, because all these things that you said, these are things which I've been speaking about. The symposium that I told you, with almost 100 speakers there and from all parts of the world. The similar issue about them doing it because it's a passion, but them not being able to do it on a full-time basis because the people are not valued. They're not being able to do it on a full-time basis. There was one person from Brazil, Constantia. She said, look, in my lifetime, I want to see that I can practice it as a full-time activity. In my lifetime, imagine she wants to do that and how constrained you are because of circumstances. So we have to do something about that we have to also discuss how to do that. But otherwise, I mean, then you went to the US and then what were the activities that you did there?
And you know, Brazilian has over 200 million people. And it happens that Constancia is my friend.
Wow. No, and she's a wonderful person. She's a wonderful person. It's been very nice talking to her in that symposium and otherwise also. So I think really, I mean, these are people that you feel, like I said, these are people should be out there only mediating, nothing else. and for them to do anything else is not fair in the world. They need people
Yeah.
like that, but like you, they just have to be out there. So we have to do something about that for sure.
Yeah, but what I say, I do teach a lot of people from completely different backgrounds in completely different environments, from different professions. And many people ask, where do I start? And I always say, the answer is the same for everybody. Start where you are. Start using mediation in what you already do and in what you already legitimate. So then you can develop towards maybe being a full-time mediator. But it's a long way, and it's a way for very few. But you can use mediation to better whatever you do.
But Gabriela, the thing is that the court system by itself is an issue for me. The court system and the mediation coming through that, I think that has actually, in a way, destroyed the profession. And people, like you said, got used to the fact that it comes for almost free. And that aspect then was carried on all over the world, that whole model that it's been successful. And in the symposium also, every session I kept saying this, that it was the self-interest of the judiciary. They wanted that case, the backlog to go. But for that self-interest, they've actually destroyed a profession. And
Yeah,
this is not, and everywhere in the world.
yeah, that's true. I wanted to mention a story, and you understand the picture. In 2015, I was in a meeting with JAMS fellows from all over the world, and I was already an alumni, and there were other alumni, and we were supposed to talk about the state, the development and the current state of mediation in our countries. And before my turn, there was this wonderful Indian woman who was one of the pioneers in India, doing mediation in the court system, and then now she's a private practitioner, very successful. And she said the sentence, India desperately needs mediation because we have 32 million pending cases in court. 32 million in India. India is about, in terms of population, India is about 5 times the size of Brazil, 5 times bigger. So I didn't know if I should laugh or cry, but I was the following after her. And when I started my talk, I said, Laila just mentioned 32 million pending cases. Brazil has 200 million people. And currently, that was 2015, now it's a little better. Currently, we have 108 million pending cases.
This would not have been a shock to me, but because I've heard this in the symposium, so now actually it's a shocking thing.
It is. No, because it means that every Brazilian is in court at least once, and some more than once. So it's an incredible inversion of values. So if society works as a pyramid, because we have, like any group, any system, we need to have most conflicts resolved by the base of the pyramid, where there's more people and where solutions are less intrusive. So you're using the time and energy of less people to resolve daily issues. It doesn't make sense to use the state for things that the society should be resolving.
Yep.
But in Brazil, since access to justice was thought of as free justice, everything goes to court. And we have a huge number of lawyers. We have more law schools than the rest of the planet, indeed. So we keep using the state to resolve our issues as if the state was the big guy and we were still children, all children. So it's a very immature attitude.
But Gabriela, I'll tell you what. Yeah, please. You were saying something. No, please.
So the normal functioning of a society is to have most conflicts resolved at the base and only a few that goes to the top because the base was not able to resolve them, but they tried. So when you have free judiciary, but it's not free, of course, because we pay taxes and
Right.
because it can be free to render an initial petition, but the one who has to defend himself will have to pay for a lawyer. So it's not free. And this is a cost that is spread up, so we don't see it. And then when everything goes up, the pyramid gets inverse. So it can either collapse or turn. So it's a completely misuse of the power and the importance of the state, in my view.
Gabriel, I tell you
And
where yeah. Oh, okay, no, please,
no,
you
go
go
ahead,
on.
go ahead.
No. I'll put this
I
point
can go
because
ahead forever.
no,
So
you have
please.
to. You have to. Please go ahead. But this point I will put across because I will put it across later. But please, you continue. Continue. I want to hear this.
No, that's it. So my point is, mediation is not only a good solution for one specific situation. It is also educational. And once people really understand the benefit of being part of the solution, not only part of the problem, and they understand that if they want the other party to perform like agreed, they have to perform like agreed, so they take responsibility. This is a maturing process for society. Of course, it will take a long time to be perceived by most, but it's the only way towards a sustainable society. And as Einstein said, I use a lot sentences that he said because he was something. He said, humanity will have to find a completely different way of thinking if it is to survive. And mediation was the first methodology that I ever found. There can be others, but I haven't found, that really lead in this sustainable direction.
Yeah.
If we don't relate sustainably, it's useless to talk about the environment or about diversity and so on and so forth.
Okay, because I tell you, again, I'll go back to that symposium. The topic of the symposium was mediation in our culture and traditions. That was the topic. Now, what came out for me from that was that, first of all, colonization has had a major effect on dispute resolution systems and the mindset. So the way, whatever conditioning that you can say that happens over hundreds of years, that the state is the body. You have to go there. All dispute resolution happens in courts. So first of all, you have to undo that. So that mindset has to be. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take its time. But I am now working on those aspects because I feel instead of popularizing and talking about mediation, first that mindset has to change. So that has to be worked on. Then traditional dispute resolution systems were destroyed because obviously the colonizer doesn't want you to resolve your disputes within yourselves. It's not good for a colonizer. Divide and rule is one aspect of it, and you have to be dependent on the state is another aspect of it. So all that the colonizer did, that effect is still there, and I don't know how long it'll take to get over that. But that is where I feel that we need to start if we have to take mediation somewhere. So that mindset needs to change. And like these figures that you're pointing out about the number of cases, this is exactly what I kept talking about. But for the US also, there are 100 million cases which are filed in a population of 300 million. That's huge. And that is when we say 40, 45 years of mediation there and everything. So there's some fundamental issue there. And I look at it from the court system. I still look at it from the court system that it hasn't worked because I've had speakers from the US and senior mediator who's only practices as a mediator. He talks about the court system and his experience there and how it is just something that people, in a way, lawyers have taken control of the mediation, entire mediation, and they use these mediators in the courts. The mediator gets nowhere. He comes in with this enthusiasm that yes, the lawyers will recognize me, I'll get private work. Doesn't happen. New lot comes in. So there's no focus on the mediator anywhere. So I'm focusing on the mediator. We have to, whatever, look, I'm not concerned about the self-interest of the judiciary. They have to get their house in order, whatever the way they have to do it. The state, like you said, we don't have to fund people's disputes. Can courts just be any other service provider? Why should the state be involved in certain things? Because I'm saying the colonizers think that we have to be involved in everything you do. But no, you don't have to be involved in everything they do. They have to resolve the disputes themselves. You can have these service providers called courts. You want to come in? Yes, you have this. It's all self-funded. This is what you get. Because why do you want to get into everything? So maybe you have to look at reforms in a lot of other ways. But your thoughts? Yeah.
In that situation of mediators mediating for free in court, thinking that that will be a networking that will bring private clients to them and so on and so forth, or that the court at some point will pay them. In Brazil, some states, because the legislation is state-wise, some states are paying the mediators an okay amount. At least it's not indecent. In other states, it's indecent. So I won't even say the amount because I mean it's nothing. Yeah, it's better to receive nothing because it will be so much work to get that little money that my time is worth more. So anyway, but it gives you experience. So as I learned in the United States, I learned mediation in the United States in a multi-door courthouse connected court annex center, but it was called a community center. So it was funded by many sources, including the judiciary, so it could be really independent. And I was very happy to work for free for some time while I was while I was learning. So it made sense. I was very, very thankful to what I was getting, which was experience, an excellent mentor, and development. But the thing is, when you do a system like that, based on voluntary service, it is not sustainable because the good people will not be there. One thing is when you are learning and you have a mentor that is present in the room to oversee what is going on and get back to track if something goes wrong. Because you cannot play with human lives. You're dealing with lives. It's like going through a surgery in the relational body. Mediation is a surgery, or even if it's not so intrusive, but it's a treatment in something that is not healthy and it's in pain. So you cannot play with people and put in the room mediators with no experience at all. Who would go to a surgery with a doctor that has never operated before, even if he read all the books in the world? So it's the same thing. So when I was doing my training, I had the mentor in the room in the United States, but in many places in Brazil, what they call it instead of supervision, it's internal vision. So it's unexperienced people giving feedback to the one that is in the table. I mean, it's really complicated, but this is what happens when we put volume before quality. And it's a natural movement for many people who don't know how mediation can be life-changing. And then the message that it sends to the market is that mediation is not effective, the quality is terrible, the mediators are not knowledgeable enough, and so on. So it also jeopardizes the market. And the situation of someone doing something for free in the expectation of getting money later on is also self-depleting, because you get very how can I say, it's like you're taking value out of yourself and you're looking for value where it's not. The judiciary will never pay enough to experienced mediators because it's not the core business. But if we do court mediation in return for status, for example, a real network, then it makes sense. So in New York, for example, I know great mediators who charge $1,000 an hour of a mediation that do court work for free because it is prestigious. So either you have the courts should pay the mediators, or they should understand that they are only the nursery. So mediators are only there while they are learning, and the teachers, of course, they go to a company to mentor the people who are learning, and that is okay. That's how I started in Brazil, overseeing mediations with my students, and that made sense. Or the mediator should have a lot of prestige. So being a court mediator means something in my resume. Then it makes sense again. But there needs to be this parity, this balance between what we give and what we get. This is also a systemic law.
But the only thing I'll tell you, Gabriela, the thing with all this is, like I said, the foundation is wrong. First of all, courts and mediation are totally two diametrically opposite things, the North Pole and South Pole. Moment you start getting them together, there will be absurd and more absurd things which will come out of it. But I will appeal to these experienced mediators, you said, who charge $1,000 and do it for free in the courts. I just want to appeal to them that you are in some way affecting the livelihood of people who are practicing as mediators only, because you are
No,
doing. No, why I'm saying so is that the people are getting it for free, and for people like us who are outside practicing as mediators, they will obviously not come to us. They will go to that court, and that is what Jeff in the symposium spoke about, that he was doing it for free there, and obviously they were all coming to him for that time, but they never took time for him outside. So for that end, the person who's practicing only as a mediator, in a way, you affected his livelihood because you're doing it as an experienced mediator like that for free. So I'm just saying free should
I
not happen.
understand the point. I understand the point, but maybe I didn't give enough information. When it's done like that, the court sends to these free mediators only the cases where the parties could not pay.
Yeah. So then it's
It
pro
was a
bono.
pro
Yeah.
bono.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
had to
Pro
be pro
bono.
bono.
Yeah. Because
But since they have a very restricted selection process, the mediators that they offer to these parties are highly experienced. They are all highly experienced. So since it is a small number of cases, because if the parties can pay, they will refer it to mediation outside in the market.
okay, that's good.
But when the people cannot pay, then they bring in these great mediators that will work for free because it is actually a pro bono case. And for them, this means a great prestige in their resume
That sounds
because
good.
it is only in those situations. So the balance is kept. It's another way of keeping balance.
Yeah, but I like that aspect what Jeff spoke about, the difference between free and pro bono. He was speaking about that aspect, that you're giving it free to people who can afford it. Pro
Yeah,
bono is a
that is
totally different
absurd.
concept. Yeah, pro bono
Yeah,
is a totally different concept, and I understand that. But here,
yeah,
the fact of getting it free, so that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense that you've given them the best, and those people are willing to give their time, and those people can't pay. So, and this
yeah.
prestige thing, look, the thing is that with the whole concept of mediation, in traditionally actually happened like that with these mediators, as we know in society. They were people who were respected, and they, for their prestige, they did that. They were not doing it for money. They were respected in that society. Could be anyone, could be in terms of the religious aspect, the rabbis or the priests or whoever, the chiefs of a tribe or whatever. But of course, a lot of them were not doing pure mediation as we know it. They were telling them
Mhm,
what to do, kind of thing. So we have to
mhm.
look at that part also, whether it was pure mediation as we call it. But that there are interesting things which came out of that in the symposium, which I will take you through, because there is a whole concept that I mean, I've been saying that social pressure is not such a bad thing. If you do
Yeah,
something because of social pressure, although you have a choice, I don't think that's such a bad thing. That can still be considered mediation. That a solution came out and you accepted the solution because it's good for the community. So I don't see that as so much of a problem, but people have individualistic societies have a problem with that, that the individual should totally not be influenced by anything. I don't think community living is such a bad thing. I don't think it's such a bad thing.
I
So
totally agree.
So a lot of interesting things came out. Interesting people came out of that. And I mean, like I keep giving the example, there's James in Kenya who's actually strengthening the traditional systems there. So there
Mhm.
is a lot of work that he's doing there. And Brazil, in Kenya, they've actually, the courts have endorsed the whatever the traditional methods, and what comes out of that, they've actually endorsed that, which is very rare. Countries haven't done that. So that strengthens the traditional systems that much more. So
Mhm.
I give this example, I'll give that example to you. Might be repetition for other people who hear this, but there was a murder that took place in a community in Kenya. So within the community, they came up with a solution that the victim's family will get 15 camels, and the thing
Mhm.
was finished. But the police obviously had to file its the report, and it went to the court, and then no one came to the court. No complainant, no witnesses, nothing. So the judge understood, sends the police to the communities, asked them what they decided, what they within themselves. So they said 15 camels thing. He passed an order on that basis. Major
Mhm.
controversy. How can you do that? You have a penal code. So then he looked at the constitution and explained that the constitution endorses these aspects. And so now today that is law. So interesting things like that are happening in the world. We don't even know about it. So building up, because I want to build it up from ground upwards, because
Mhm.
otherwise I don't, it hasn't taken off the way it should have taken off, the way we would think, because we know it works and everything, but still why isn't it as popular as it should be? So I'm looking at it, let's, like you said, I mean, even talking about the people who do it, let's pick up those people who have the natural ability, they're already out there doing it, and they don't even know this called mediation. They don't know there's a
Mhm.
word called mediation. It's just part of their life, it's a way of life. So get them into the fold. So for that, I will tell you that, I mean, the one lecture series I've started based on what Ken Cloak said in one of my, I do a show called Evolution of a Mediator. So in that, he mentioned that he went for a lecture about mediation, and in 2 minutes he knew his life had changed. But how many people access to those lectures? He was a judge at that time, so he had access to that lecture. So I said, let's put out these lectures, and you are going to be part of that. As I've understood from what you have just said, you are perfect as a lecturer. You need to be out there telling, inspiring people. So I said, let's put them out. Let's inspire people. There's so many people must be out there. They are there. So let's get them into the fold. So I want to start from there. So once the user experience is guaranteed, because this person is already trusted and already people are being benefited. So user experience is guaranteed. So let's take them from there and let's start from there. Maybe that might be the way it might take off, because the right people will be there. So because
Mhm.
this training aspect and all, I have an issue with that, because I'm saying you can't make a mediator. That whole evolution of a mediator series was for that, just to show that this person has gone through so much. That is
Mhm.
what makes the person a mediator. Not going
True.
to a particular training, I made you a mediator. No. So that if you watch one of those episodes of Evolution of a Mediator, you'll see what they've gone through. So many aspects of things get together, and I said over time we'll find a common thread between all these people also. We'll find a common thread, but I'm not wanting to put that common thread. Let people watch them and work that out. But a lot of common thread is coming out of it. And of course, one aspect I keep talking about is spirituality. Spirituality plays an important role in that, and that I see with these people, everything. So that, so a lot of areas which are not touched when we generally talk about mediation and training and all that. So I have a little bit of a different viewpoint, which might not be what people want to hear, but I still put it across.
I completely agree. And I work a lot with the spirituality and in spiritual intelligence. And I like to explain this constellation work, uh, especially when I talk in corporations to business people. I say it, if you have tried to resolve a problem with the best of your intellectual intelligence, you've brought in the best consultants, the best professionals, and nobody solved the problem. Logically, the solution is outside of what intellectual intelligence can reach. It's basically in the unconsciousness. As Jung used to say, the consciousness is equivalent to a cork floating in an ocean of unconsciousness. So there's a lot of probability that solutions are in the unconsciousness. So what the system, the methodology does is to bring up your other intelligences to help you with what the intellectual intelligence has already achieved. So it's complementary to intellectuality, because intellectuality is more likely to be not enough than to be enough. And then we come in with not only emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, but mainly spiritual intelligence, because spiritual intelligence is the only one that can help us really be conscient about the system that is much bigger than us, that is affecting us. This is what brings our point of view to something broader than ourselves, which is a reality no matter if we want it or not, if we like it or not. We are spiritual beings, and that's why we are here, by the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is one thing which is not really discussed and actually forms a very important part of the process. And maybe because it's not, look, you can't quantify it. I mean, you can't put a meter and say, okay, this much spirituality goes into it. It's just there. I keep talking about the energy aspect also. What say a mediator brings in, that energy field around a mediator and everything. That's an important aspect of the whole thing. You can't put a gauge to it. So then how do you, people talk about training? I said, well, can you train this aspect? This is just something that a person brings in. How the person brings it, where it comes from, we have to bring that. Then the soul comes into the picture and all those things. There are much wider areas which need to be discussed around it, which are lost because there is some formal concept that was developed at some point and that got carried through. So maybe, I don't know, a lot of people might think I have these very radical ideas on the whole thing, but I don't think they're radical. I think this is very normal, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. So then you'll tell me I'm not so radical.
No, I totally agree. So if you're radical, I'm also.
Perfect. Now I noticed that. So that's exactly what I understand, that if there are people who understand this, we just have to bring them together and take it in a direction which might be, today might sound radical, but maybe that's the direction it had to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yesterday, I was talking, no, the day before. Anyway, this week, I was talking to this great friend of mine that I only met online. I've never been in the same room with her, but we became very good friends. And she is Australian. Actually, she's South African but lives in Australia for her whole life. And we were talking exactly about this movement that we are noticing of these people like you and me and her and other people. They are talking more and more openly about the spirituality that is part of life, not something supernatural, but something natural that makes us super.
Yep.
uh, and these people are starting to get together, and we're starting to have the momentum for a quantic I, I forgot that, like when you raise one level into a better reality, a more refined reality, a more understanding of nature, a better understanding of nature. So we need to be connected so that we can inspire those who are prone to see it but not already there. So we will not change anybody who don't want to be changed. We will not impose anything because it's part of nature. So one day or the other, it will come up. It's unavoidable. It's a need for
But
humanity.
no, but Gabriela, it's suppressed because of certain reasons, and those reasons are not changing. I mean, look, materialism is one of those reasons it gets suppressed because of, and a lot of other aspects which people are stuck with. So to be able to get them out of those things, to see that this is like a, in a way, let's see, as light at the end of the tunnel, to even get them to that point when they can see that light, that is becoming more and more difficult, because those aspects which have changed society over time, to be able to undo that. And look, right, one I said on the mind, of course, in terms of dispute resolution, the colonization aspect of it, but the society that we created around us over so many years has definitely, I mean, for someone to say that that light is light, first of all, they have to know that is light. They might even not even think it's light.
Many times they can only be tired of the darkness.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
They
yeah.
because the darkness doesn't exist. The darkness is the absence of light.
Yep. Yep.
So when people are tired of the darkness, they naturally seek for light, which is, we can make it as a synonym to knowledge. So, and we what we are talking about starts to get into science. So there is this one scientist, he's British, and his name is Rupert Sheldrake. He was the guy that explained the constellations to Bert Hellinger. So Bert Hellinger, the German guy who invented the methodology to deal with something that he couldn't name, but now we call the field. It is an electromagnetic field, actually, that connects us unconsciously. Rupert Sheldrake, who is a biologist by his first profession is biologist, and then he became a philosopher as well. And he's a scientist that started studying behaviors that could not be explained by matter. So he started looking at plants and then small animals and trying to understand why some groups had a certain behavior and others didn't, and how these behaviors passed through generations without any possibility of them writing books or anything. So for example, he noticed that the frogs and the salamandra, they have basically the same physical, chemical structure. But if you cut off a part of the salamandra, it will grow back, and in the frog it won't. And then they made little stimulation, electric stimulation to the frog where it was cut, and the frog developed, reconstituted the member. Mm-hmm. So why do frogs not search for the electric stimulation while the salamanders do? Behavior, this is behavior. Behavior passed through the field much more than through matter. You cannot explain through the DNA or anything like that. So that's how he started to study this phenomenon. And he called it electromagnetic field. And then he named it morphogenetic fields. And then he was invited to a workshop with Bert Hellinger. And after the workshop, he asked Hellinger, do you know why this happens? The phenomenon that he just saw, people capturing information that was not intellectual, it's sensorial. And Bert Hellinger said, I don't know why it happens, and I don't care. It's enough for me that it happens. And then Rupert said, so let me explain you. And then he explained his whole theory that he was already developing. And now he's getting more and more into these, bringing unconsciousness into science, explaining how this happens for natural reasons. It's nothing supernatural. It's just nature, but nature beyond matter. Yeah. And materialism is very limited because they only consider what they can see tangibly. But science is going beyond, finally. So I think it's getting better.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, like this energy thing that I'm talking about, look, for me, it is all my concepts, because I don't, you will hear on my shows and everything, I keep saying that I don't read books. So my concept, at least you are putting a theory around it. So that's very nice. So the concepts and that theory comes from there. But this energy aspect of it, it's interesting what we were discussing before we started the live thing, that the connection and physical meetings and that aspect of it. But I'm telling you, this energy aspect happens online. I have Zoom meetings, and in that Zoom meetings, I can feel that energy aspect of people. And you can actually feel it. I don't know how it happens. So that happens. So that means there is something more than that physical sense. There is something beyond that. And obviously, to explain it, and you are going to tell me now on the theory part of it. So this is what I have noticed, and that is why for me this online world works perfectly for me. So because it's the same thing that you gauge, you get to know people in that manner, that energy feels and everything. So now please put a theory behind it, please.
No, I didn't do it. It was Einstein. As he said, space and time are illusions. That's why the field works through Zoom, through anything. And even if we were not seeing each other, we were just thinking about each other. If you are aware enough, if you are sensible to the signs, you can get it. Not because you're superhuman, just because you're human. Just because I'm human too, and we are connected somehow. That's
Yeah.
all.
Well, the whole connection to the soul. I mean, I keep talking about that part, that connection to the soul. So now basically that soul part of it, you will put down to science. Now you're going to tell me about that also. Please tell me that way. There must be some theory on that also.
Well, Disney, even Disney World is already doing some, the new film of Disney is called Soul,
Wow.
and it's about reincarnation.
Okay.
You should watch it. You must watch it. I loved it. It's not for my daughter, it's for me.
No good.
But she loved it too.
I must watch
So
that.
it's
Yeah.
that kind of movie that is good for every phase of life. That for adults it has a meaning, for children it has another meaning, but it's great for everybody. So even Disney is starting to be aware of it. The two last movies of Disney, Soul and Maya, The Last Dragon, I think that's the name,
Mhm.
they are about this uh, um, new level of consciousness
Mhm.
of the intangible. Watch both.
Not
I
bad.
love both.
Not bad. And if Disney is doing it and it goes to the children and there is some understanding on that whole thing comes from within, because it's all within, it'll come from within them. I think that's a very good sign if that happens.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
for
good.
them, for example, my daughter, I talk about naturally about all these things, and she questions and she goes beyond many times, because for them it's how the world is. They're not questioning it because it already came to them naturally.
Yeah. And before they get
It's like
influenced,
using the cell phone. We had to learn how to use a cell phone and Zoom and everything. Their generation, they were already born. At least my daughter, she was already born with an iPhone in front of her, taking pictures all day long. And so for her, she deals with it with no fear.
yeah,
We still fear breaking the thing and it stops working and it has a virus and so on. For them, it's part of their body.
yeah,
So they will go much further beyond us,
definitely.
like we did with our parents. And this is the natural thing to do. We get everything that the previous generations have reached. And our role is to go a little, at least a few steps beyond.
No, and then the basic thing in that is to tell ourselves that they know better. So let them, whatever they think, do, let them. Maybe it's certain things might be experiments, might be whatever, but we have to let them go beyond. That is the most important part. To
Yeah.
tell every
And then
generation, yeah.
there is another explanation for that. And one other development besides Bert Hellinger, there are two other Germans who have been creating methodologies to deal with the field. And this other one called Matthias Varga von Kibet and his wife Insa Sparer, he's a mathematician. He's alive, thank God. He is the head of the logic uh, subject in the Munich University. And he developed another way, completely different than Bert Hellinger's way to deal with constellation. They called it structural constellation. And it's all based on mathematics. And what he said, I did a training with him and I was completely, I felt like I could be there forever. And he explained this need that we have, and this is also part of constellation. We deal with it frequently. The need that we have to go beyond what we got from our parents is explained by the sequence of Fibonacci. The Fibonacci sequence is what explains a lot of phenomena in natural physics. So all the hurricanes, all the shape of the of shells, and I mean many other things in life, many I could name, are explained by this mathematical equation. And the sequence starts by 1 and then 2 and 3 and 5, because every number ahead in the sequence is the sum of the 2 previous one, which means that we are always the difference that we make between what came before us and what will come afterwards us. If you have children, your children. If you don't have natural children, your projects, the good that you did to other people. These are the children that we put in the world in a broader sense. And it's mathematically explained that your life meant what you added beyond what you got. And the main problem that we have, that we see in the life of many people, is that they reject what they got from their parents. And by parents, I don't mean only the biological parents, but everybody that came before and gave them the place that they got in life. So if you started at a certain point, at your own place in the system, it is because of everybody that came before. The good and the bad, what was done and what was not done yet. And the beautiful thing is that because it's not finished, you still have a lot to do, and your life is so necessary. And you're here to do the best you can to put forward the whole humanity so that the next generation will start from a better place, and the next and the next.
So basically, we have to look 2 generations back and then move forward from there. Whatever you were like, because you said 2 numbers at the back, so let's say 2
generations. Yeah, but it can be your father and your mother.
Yeah, could be. Yeah,
different interpretation. I don't think we go that deep in the connection.
No, but I'm okay with going two generations back also. I mean, there is so much that got lost, maybe. But the generation behind you might not have picked up certain things. So you go back and you pick up something more. So you've added more than what they picked up. So maybe that way it works also, because some people might reject certain things, but you might see the value in it. So you must look back beyond what people behind you look back. So maybe that's also important. So that's also important, I think.
Yeah, but also, if you reject what you got for any reason, because you were born in a violent family, because you never met your father, because your mother was a drug addict, it doesn't matter. Every story has something hard to deal with. But if you think that they were not good enough, you will always be looking backwards, and you will not be fulfilling your role in life, which is to think what you got and then move forward. You can only move forward once you have embraced everything you got. And there is a sentence by Isaac Newton that I love to talk about this subject. He said, I could only see further because I stepped on the shoulders of giants.
Yep.
So this is what children do to what they got.
Yep, exactly.
So,
but now what I've understood from this is, Gabriela, is that I started a series which I did not take forward after that. I did about 3, 4, 5 episodes of that. It was called Mediators, Mediation, and Spirituality. Now I've understood it's coming back, and Gabriela is going to be on that. She's going to take us through a lot of interesting things, I think, and even what we're discussing now, this is that other show that I do, In Conversation with the Beautiful Mind. This is what it's all about, these conversations. So I think maybe I'll have to rename this one. I'll have to call it that. No, we'll have to do another one of that. We'll do another one. That'll be another one, because I did keep this only. I don't know why this JAMS fellow thing happened, because there are so many people out there who didn't, first of all, don't even have known about it. So at least that information. Then to get inspired with experiences of yours, at least there is something that they can look at and find out. And then maybe learn about maybe just the fact that how the projects that you thought of and what you did, and then you came back and how you implemented all that. That was the idea behind this series for the JAMS fellows. So I don't know if there is anything else you want to tell them on that, please. If there's more on the JAMS fellowship aspect of it.
What I wanted to tell you is that next time it has to be the inverse. I asked the questions and you answered.
Look, Gabriela, a lot of people have said that. A lot of people said that. I said that will happen, and when I'm 75, because that is the way I started with the evolution of a mediator with Ken Cloak. He was, of course, he was almost 80 that time. This year only he turned 80. So there's enough time for that.
I know him.
Yeah. So he's a wonderful person. He's a wonderful person.
Yeah,
Such a no,
wonderful.
because we I've
And the work that he created, the Mediators Beyond Borders, is absolutely phenomenal.
let me tell you something. Like in terms of what he writes, I keep telling him also I don't read books. So the what he writes, I would not have read. But just the person that he is, the beautiful soul that he is, that's what is good having being with, that just being there. So that's what I'm saying, that this is something about that energy feel that feels good. Because all the work that he did and does, I have not read about it. I mean, of course, he co-founded Mediators Beyond Borders. Okay, you get to know that as you go along. Okay, but the person, I'm more interested in the person. Everything else can be around that, but that person is something that, I mean, you don't find that many beautiful souls as you go along with life. There are lots of them, there are, but you don't actually come across so many. So that has been the good part about this online world, that that interaction that I've had with so many people, I've been able to find such good people all over the world, and that's felt good. And then, of course, just connecting with them and whatever. I mean, look, you don't have to be doing something together. It's just the fact that you connect. And like you said, that connection is not even if you're on a Zoom call, that connection is beyond that. So that I think that is what feels good. Connected to
Yeah,
good people. There's something good, nice about that.
yeah.
So we
I
have to,
totally agree.
yeah. But,
It's absolutely wonderful to meet you.
but,
I'm very,
but,
very pleased
but
and
what I've
touched.
No, they're very nice of you. And this, I'm just saying that all that you've said, I'm telling you, there's so much that we have to discuss and learn from you. I'm not, I mean, just you have to take us through theory, because I said I'm not a theory person at all. I am practical, by experience kind of things that I put across. I think both the combination of the two is required, because I come from a total, like I say, unadulterated thing, that I don't have any theory which is playing on my mind. Whatever I've seen and heard and experienced, I come from there, and put it onto a theory is much better for me, so that I'm not influenced by so much reading. But what I'm going to do is, which I would always do, is take you through what I do in a month. This month thing I'm going to take you through, so you know that all these activities happen, because LinkedIn and Zoom, Facebook will never tell you all this, because their algorithm will only show you certain parts. But why I'm trying to put this across is that there are so many things, and of course YouTube channel, subscribe to it, you get to know what's happening. So I'm just going to take you through that, and then of course we'll go further on this. This was that symposium. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, this says 80 plus. I've asked. This was designed by Rafael. He's in Mexico. This is on the original poster of Woodstock. So after that, it became 90 plus. So he's good. I've asked him to change that. But really nice what he did. I mean, I really like this. So this is what happened in August and September. And
Very nice.
this series that I've started, Mediator Experiences. So Adi was there. All, these are recorded. I mean, LL.M, all wonderful people. I don't know. I'm sure you know them. Just very nice people. Question
Very nice.
marks. Then Vigle. This is she's the one in that in conversations, the beautiful mind who told me about this, and that's where the interest came in. And then Kachachina, and they've all of them have been on my other
Hmm.
shows of Evolution of a Mediator or in Conversations with Beautiful Mind. They've been there. Vana,
Ivana. Mhm.
Gidey was there yesterday. Really nice. He's from Ethiopia. Very nice person. This is you.
Oh, I know her.
Yeah, I just seen the scene. And then the Chitra is supposed to record it. Let's see when she gets time. This was there's a draft mediation bill that just come out. There was a discussion on that. Then workshop I did on that, doing this one tomorrow also on this bill. Because for me, this is important, because I just feel that regulating it is a big issue. And of course, we have to give our views. What happens is later, because I'm according to me, government and judiciary should just stay away from at least mediation. Dispute resolution has to happen otherwise than in courts and with the government. But they're trying to get in some way. So that this is that lecture series that I started. This was the inspiration behind that. This is what Ken Cloak said in that thing. So
I completely understand the feeling.
yeah, so I'm just saying there's so many people we need to inspire. So you are going to
Hmm.
be one of the lecturers on that. We discussed that schedule. So like Michael Lang, of course, I don't know whether you know Michael Lang. Again, another wonderful,
No, not personally, no.
okay, beautiful soul. I'll send you the invitation tomorrow. Yeah, he's coming on one of my shows called Talking Books. I'll just tell you about that. She's in
Great.
Argentina. Again, very good
Hmm.
thoughts, good intentions, wonderful person, sitting in a one small town, wanting to do very nice things. But obviously, what opportunities you get as you go along in mediation, that there's some limitations there. So I'm trying to see what we can do. And
Hmm.
he's from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Mayer, I don't know whether you know him. He's
No.
also, I mean, very senior mediator, and again, very wonderful person. We started this in this month, and he obviously expected in this evolution of a mediator that okay, he'll start getting into his life and everything. I only talk about and go into a person's life, into history and everything. To right now, in one episode, we've only covered his grandparents and his mother growing up. And he was like, also said, in all my life, no one has asked me these questions. So we're in it's slow process because everything matters. What values your mother gave you and what experiences they had, that makes you what you are. It's not as simple as you just saying, okay, now I'm doing this work, I'm a mediator. No, there are lots that goes into it. Gunawati, again, wonderful person from Malaysia. She gave her lecture yesterday, day before yesterday. So this is what is happening tomorrow, and I want you to come for this. So he's into reflective practice. So he has these
Wonderful.
reflective practice groups all over the world. So he's getting people from that group, although it says 5:30, but it's going to be 6:30 because he had some commitments and that time because the time changes, no? That this daylight saving time changes.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of it for him, that calculation did not work out. So now it's 6:30, but anyway, I'll send you that invitation, the Zoom link. So this should be interesting. This is a reflective practice thing.
Very, very
Okay, this
interesting.
is for people to get a discount. He's given a special discount for people. Of course, there was a talking books with Ken. He actually gave a discount, which was the code was called Vikram. So I was happy with that. Special. That was special. Kathy Potter, another very interesting person. She's of course in the symposium also. You should watch her session about art and mediation. She's been talking about that and a lot of interesting things. So this is actually part 3 of her episode. And Raphael is the one who designed that poster. So this, and then Andrea, another, she's also part of Michael's reflective practice groups also, and of course she's keeps coming for these events that I do. Again, another wonderful person. And this is on the last day of the month to celebrate the
Your
birthdays.
birthday.
No, not my
It's your
birthday.
birthday.
No,
Ah.
birthdays of mediators in that month.
Okay.
You can wish me. I'm okay. I'm always ready to celebrate. But this is what that was for. So because look, I keep saying mediators are special people. Let's celebrate them, which is what is not happening. They're just taken for
That's true.
granted. No one puts any value to them because it comes so naturally to them. They don't put value to themselves. Forget the world putting a value to them. So this is what the idea behind this was. So this is what a month looks like.
Very, very nice. I just thought while we were passing through and you talked about the legislation in India, I remember the very good friend who I met at JAMS. He is currently he is also an arbitrator at JAMS. Just a second. And he's a law professor at Loyola Law School. And he had a class just about mediation legislation, and they were designing a suggestion to the Indian mediation law. And so he called some people to talk about comparative legislation, etc. So I was one of the people who talked to the class about the Brazilian process of building the legislation. And then I mean, that was just raw material for the product that they were building together with the class of this suggestion to the Indian law.
But this
And
was that
he's
Hero?
a
Was that
very
Hero Aragami?
hero. Yeah,
Yeah. He's been on my show also in Conversations of Beautiful Mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. He's a great friend, a
Yeah.
wonderful person.
I told him that the whole common thing of that evolution of mediator came out. They're good human beings. He said, "I don't think I'm a good human being." you have to watch his episode. You must watch. It's a very nice conversation it was.
He's funny.
Yeah, it's really nice. It was really nice.
Which makes him even better.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
I'll tell you the issue with this whole legislation thing is I keep telling people that India has the best law on mediation. Okay, it's called
Which is none.
No, it's the best. It's called conciliation.
You already have it. Okay.
It's called conciliation. No, it has always been there since 1996. I've been saying all the time that's the best law on mediation because the point is that mediation, as we have been speaking about today, has a definition in the Singapore Convention. And it says any process by whatever name it's called, however you do it, as long as it's the third person, it's a mediator, assisting you in resolving a dispute, but doesn't have the authority to impose a decision. That's it. So, and UNCITRAL has clarified that in the earlier model laws, they were using the word conciliation. Now they're using mediation. And we picked it up from the UNCITRAL model law. So people forgot that history behind it. And they kept saying, no, mediation is different, conciliation is different. In the new UNCITRAL model law mediation, they've clarified it. They specifically put there that this is what we were saying, this is what it is, very clearly. So I'm saying we have the best law on mediation, and these two words of mediation and conciliation being used in our arbitration act also, there is a usage of mediation and conciliation under the aspect of that consent award aspect of it, that the arbitrator should see whether they can resolve it through mediation or conciliation. And I keep saying why those two words are required. I'm saying there is an informal process of mediation happening all the time. It doesn't have to end in a written settlement agreement. Verbal contracts are as good as contracts in our country. And it must be in a lot of countries, but in our country, of course, a verbal contract is as good. And if the parties want to leave it at a verbal contract, you can't force them to put a settlement in a written contract. But that's a verbal contract will not come under our conciliation law, because that requires a written settlement agreement, because the written settlement agreement is as good as a court decree. So if they don't want to go through that process, they don't have to. So they use mediation. And then in that case, it becomes a contract which is enforceable as a contract. And this conciliation is a decree which is executable. So in same thing in the arbitration, when it says that, it means when you go for mediation, you are still in the arbitration, and you come back to the arbitrator, and he passes a consent award. When you go for conciliation, under it's part of the Arbitration Conciliation Act. So if you go for conciliation, you go out of the arbitration, and that by itself, that conciliation, that written settlement agreement is as good as a consent award. So you don't have to go back to the arbitrator. So it's all very well laid out, and no one has spoken about this, and they keep confusing people and their vested interests who want to do that also. And this has gone on for 25 years. Can you imagine? We have the best law in the world. Can you imagine the empowerment of a person sitting in a village in India, 1.3 billion people? How much access to courts can you give them? There are thousands of kilometers away from the Supreme Court. There are villages in India which must be 2,500 kilometers away from the Supreme Court. So they're sitting in that village, if you can get a court decree, and it's such a simplified way, nothing. I mean, just a process laid down. That's what we needed. And today also we need that. But because there are vested interests and the self-interest of the judiciary, I say, why are you even talking about mediation? It has nothing to do with you. And you have finished off litigation. You finished off arbitration. I just finished a mediation, which was an arbitration, which was pending, and it was 14 years. Imagine, suit filed in 2007, goes for arbitration, comes back to the court because it's challenged, the award is challenged, is lying in the court. The entire process has already taken 14 years. It might take another 10 years. This is arbitration. So you finished off, judiciary has finished off litigation, finished off arbitration. Now let us finish off mediation also. Let us not let it survive. That is where my problem with the entire thing happens. So, but look, I'm one of those lone voices, because I'm one of the very rare people in this world who only practices as a mediator. Very rare. It's very rare in the world. So for me, I'm a real lone voice, because everyone has their interest. They're part of the court system. So they keep the judges happy. Some of them think they'll become judges tomorrow if they do mediations in the court system. They'll be recognized. So those, a lot of things. Judiciary has a self-interest, which I just said. They want to clear the backlog. They're not the least interested if mediation develops or doesn't develop. And they can't ask people to pay for a process which they didn't come for. So they can't ask people to pay for mediation. So ultimately, either the state funds it. So if the state funds it, I'm saying, why should a mediator in the court system get anything less than a judge? And actually should get more than a judge, because at least that finality is coming. The judge's order will be challenged, can be challenged, and might be overturned also. But the mediator is at least giving finality to that whole dispute. So pay him more than the judge also. But it is not that recognition, and finally that colonization and mindset will come through. And you'll hear me repeat this. I'm so sure you're tired of this. I'll stop here. I won't go any
No,
further.
I'm not tired at all. Quite the opposite. But I unfortunately have another meeting that's waiting.
So this happens with me. Like that show that I do in Conversation with a Beautiful Mind, sometimes it goes on for 3 hours. And that evolution of a mediator went on, one episode went on for 4 hours without a break. So I have that limit to go on. You have to tell me, look, Vikram, thank you very much. We can talk again. Not a problem.
If I could, I would love to stay for the whole day, 24 hours.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say that. So we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We'll do that episode of In Conversation with Beautiful Mind. So at this point, let me thank you. and maybe let
Thank
me
you
just
so
stop the live
much.
stream. So thank you very much, Gabriela. It was wonderful talking to you, and all these thoughts that you put together, and they resonate, and they also things that I thought about, and my concepts through experience, and your theory that you're bringing in. I think it's an ideal combination. So thanks
And
a
it's
lot.
great to see that the whole world is almost the same.
Yes,
So,
exactly. It is exactly because, well, when you come down to the soul, that you do nothing, no nationalities, no nothing else comes in between. It's a very pure concept. So that part
exactly.
of it is so. So let me just stop the